Okay, welcome to the Stellify podcast. And tonight I'm joined once again by someone who made quite a big impact for some of my audience members, and that's Skarlet Lu Realta. Our first conversation went deep into the architecture of this realm, psychic interference, trauma gateways, entities, sovereignty, and what it actually means to reclaim your reality in a world that seems scripted. If you haven't watched part one yet, I genuinely recommend going back. It sets the foundation for what we're about to explore tonight. Skarlet is not someone who learned magic from books or modern spiritual cliches. Her knowledge comes from lived experience, from walking ancient lands, confronting shadow forces, navigating portals of consciousness, and surviving things most people only read about. Skarlet has travelled through places like Transylvania, Egypt, and other initiatory landscapes where the veil is thin, and she's carried that gnosis into her work today. And tonight, I want to understand how this path actually began, and how does someone become aware of magic? How does one learn to navigate entities, synchronicities, symbols, and energetic forces without losing themselves? And how do these experiences transform a person's life? So welcome back, Skarlet. Lovely to see you as always. How are you doing?
Back.
Well, it's there's a few things that I've wanted to speak to you about since I've got to know you, and I thought we could try and get into some of your journeys. But I mean, before we get into that, you refer to what you practice and understand as magic with a K, not a CK, a letter K. So when did this realization first begin? How did that come about?
Well, it came about in a whole mix of things, let's say. You probably noticed that there's a K in my name, Skarlet, SK, instead of the normal spelling SC. So actually, S and K, sodium and kalium, are the base elements of alchemy, of transformation. So as you know, the academy used to be called Scholomantry, SK. Again, that SK. Magic, the reason I spell magic with a K is for a number of reasons. First of all, I wanted to differentiate it very, very clearly so that it's not simply seen and accepted and embraced as a form of magic that people are typically conditioned to believe magic is. So whether that is the magician's magic, though, as you know, we dive into the magician's magic and how amazing it is for reconstructing reality. So it's not specifically that, and we tend to associate that with the letter C, magic with the C. I'll pull a rabbit out of a hat to saw somebody in half and, make it disappear. And then the CK has this very strong connection with, I guess, Wiccan, and typically it's used in the spiritual terrain to refer to as magic. But as you well know, and what we're doing is something a bit different. And so I wanted to differentiate it, and that's why I chose to use the word with the letter K. And it was subsequent to that, which actually this is a very strong point for everybody. The way magic works is that it doesn't give you the affirmation before you jump. You jump, and once you've taken the leap, the affirmation shows up. And in this case, I took the leap and made sure I called magic, or spelt magic as magic with K everywhere. And afterwards I found out, and it's quite a story as to how I found out, but I won't go into that now because it could take forever. But I found out that actually spelt with a K, it goes all the way back to the true magic in the elemental forces of nature. And, and when I saw that, I just felt like that was so totally aligned, because as you know, we dive deep into the quantum with the magic that we work with. And essentially we're getting to the foundations of what creates nature in the first place. So it felt so right. So that is where the letter K comes from. Working with, you could say, the foundational transformation of elemental reality.
Yeah. Wow. Okay, that makes sense. Was there a singular moment in your life or a series of events that forced you into awareness of magic?
Oh, it was 100% that whole event that I described on our last podcast in Ireland. I mean, I'd had awareness since I was tiny, and all the way through my life. I just, like I said, I think before, I think like many people, it's there, and then you try and push it down because you feel like you've got to fit and conform, and you can see people think you're crazy, and so you try and squash it. That's what I did, but it was always there. And then I just had that period of Scotland to Ireland, 2005, 2006, that massive resurgence of it. It was so strong that there was no way I could possibly ignore it or push it down anymore. And I think in those moments, particularly after Ireland, when I came back from Ireland, it was so instantaneous that I could see that all of reality was alive and talking to me, everything. And it was just like being hit by this wall of wonder, of magic that you just can't deny anymore. You know, how do you explain that absolutely everything you're interacting with is literally alive and speaking back to you?
It's wild.
So that's where it began. I mean, that's where I guess the point of no return happened, like all great on their journey, right? And that's the point where they think they just got themselves out of trouble, but they find that they've got themselves into the greatest trouble of all. They've taken the leap.
And no choice.
That's it. No way back.
No way back. Did you have any mentors, or was this just a completely solitary initiation throughout your journey then?
So what was interesting for me was that I didn't know anyone. Well, there was one friend of mine who I didn't realize that she was so aware and open of energy as she was. But she didn't have a clue what was going on with me. I mean, she was just gobsmacked. To be honest, everyone around me was, and all the people that I started to meet, because of course, as this was happening, you know, all the phenomenon that I was experiencing, and I know I've spoken about it before, so I won't go back over it again now. It was so extreme that the people that I had known, friends, family, people like that, literally thought I'd lost the plot completely. And people that I was meeting, and these are people that are very, I guess, from people that were very learned, let's say, in the spiritual arena, to people that were sort of very enthusiastic. And for me, a lot of that whole spiritual world is dogma. A lot of it is hugely dogma, like anything really, I guess. But what was happening was the people that I was meeting, they could tell me bits, but they couldn't explain what was happening to me. So I didn't have anyone that I could go to that could sit down and say, this is why this is happening. When there was nobody that could do that, I had to find that out for myself. So did I have a mentor? No. Did I have a lot of people that I met that were extraordinary? Yes. And they all, but what was happening was I was taking bits and pieces from all sorts of different places. And, you know, yes, there were people in the spiritual arena, but a lot of the people I was talking to were scientists and mystics from the mountains who I totally wouldn't call themselves spiritual. Archaeologists, historians, neurolinguists, all sorts of people like this, to try and understand, you know, what the heck was going on and fitting it all together like a jigsaw puzzle. So, but then the first time I would say that I truly, I mean, anyone who ever reads my Sacred Quest trilogy will see where I journeyed right at the very beginning with a couple of people who I thought could help and lead and support me. And, then I soon realised that that wasn't the case. But that said, I'm somebody who I'm truly grateful for absolutely everybody who's been on my journey. I totally, value whatever they've brought, even if I've really not liked it. I've certainly loved it in gratitude for where it's brought me to, that's for sure. But I think it wasn't until I got to India, when I got to India and my publishers in India said, we want you to come and meet our sadhu, first time down from the Himalayan mountains in 23 years. And they said, his name's Babba G. I had no idea who Babba G was, absolutely none. And they take me around all these back streets of Delhi, because all the guys in India kept saying, we don't know what you are. We don't know what you are. And I'm like, I am just me having this experience. And anyway, they took me around these back streets to this little apartment, and I walked in there, and there's, all these disciples on their knees to this guru, Babba G.
Yeah.
And I've never in my life seen someone with so much joy as this man, Babba G. He was standing and he had this big orange turban around his head, and it was wrapped in all these orange clothing. And he looked at me with these eyes that were like a kid who was in the most amazing sweet shop ever. He just looked at me and he went, I've been waiting 23 years for you. And he just threw his arms around me, and we just sat and we talked for ages. And he said, I've been your writing guide, and blah, blah. And of course he came out with all this stuff that he couldn't possibly, no one knew. And it was just jaw dropping. A couple of friends that were with me were, what the heck? How could he know this? And it was crazy stuff without me going into loads of it now. It was wild what was going on, Babba G has a mobile phone. His phone rings and it's the same ringtone as mine, which is my favourite song, and crazy stuff like that,
Wow.
But he then just said to me, look, I know very well what you're here to write, and this is what it is. And he just said the stuff that he said that was crazy, because it was. And he just said, you need to go back now and go and do this, this, and this, and then write that trilogy, which is what I did.
Wow.
I would say that that's never left me. He, as a being, regardless of names, was extraordinary. And so I often feel his presence. But what I would say is I met him as an equal. And to me, he was somebody who wanted to be met as an equal. And he was somebody that valued that all life is equal. And he was set aside, in my view, from almost anyone I'd met that you could possibly say was in the spiritual realm. He was unlike any of that. So if I was ever going to say I had a real mentor, I guess it would be him.
Right. Interesting.
But it's more, he was a guide, and he still is in presence, but not because I sit and I don't look to him for answers. I just feel the presence. Does that make sense? Yeah,
it totally makes sense. Yeah, it certainly makes sense to me, and I'm sure it will do for plenty of the listeners as well that's on their own journey. But
I mean, to be honest, I feel so blessed. I've met so many extraordinary people, and I would say that everybody touches you. Everybody, helps you on your journey. Let's say that's for sure. But yeah, he's been standout.
So, I mean, obviously, you mentioned India. You've been to quite a few places, haven't you? And I know that you've been to Transylvania, which is always a place that I've wanted to go to, I'll be honest, And what drew you to places like Transylvania? And I think you've been to Egypt as well, is that right? And
I haven't been to Egypt.
You've not been to Egypt, right?
All around Israel and places like that, all around those areas.
Okay.
I've been to the Arctic, Antarctic.
The Arctic, yeah. You've been there, right? I've seen some serious stuff. As in, not just the places, but what's going on in them. Well, I'd love to know.
Transylvania is incredible. Yeah. So what drew me there? Well, there's a guy that I was seeing at the time that was Romanian, and I'd always had this thing about Transylvania that I wanted to go. I was fascinated for as long as I can ever remember around the real story behind, the popularized Dracula story, of which I was certain it must be it must be hiding something, and it was. Yes. So, and then basically what happened was I came across, there's a guy called Peter Moon who's written some books along with another Romanian guy. They're called Transylvanian Sunset and Transylvanian Moonrise. If anyone's interested, I would really recommend getting the books. They're not an easy read, but they're a fabulous read, is what I'm going to say. So I was utterly intrigued because I just knew something was going on out there. And before having read any of those books or knowing anything like that, I was talking about it with this guy. And so he said, oh, come and let's go and see it. So my first time to Transylvania just utterly blew me away. And then from there on in, I went back alone a couple of times, just did some big journeys on my own. And then I started taking students out there, actually, because we do some amazing student treks out there, which is awesome. So rather than me explaining sequentially and chronologically what happened, let me just share with you what's going on out there. So in 2003, the Romanian Secret Service uncovered something. And it's in these mountains called the Bicej Mountains. I have to say, Romania, when I first went there, was like the land that time had forgot. So different to most places. It was just extraordinary. There's not many places you can go to now where you will go and you'll still find gypsies sitting in haystacks on the back of horse and carts, driving around with their little gingerbread houses, knocking around. And actually they had these huge gin palaces really out there. They were kind of quite amazing. Peasants toiling in the field, a train that's literally on rails that's going through long grasses in the field, to cut across. It's sort of all like that. And it's the oldest wildling woodland in, I think it might even be the world. It's definitely Europe that's in there. I mean, it's a pretty amazing place, to be honest, Romania. And so there's that side of it. But I cried the first time I went there because I felt like I'd come home. It was so strong. And so my journeys uncovered some really extraordinary things. So there are these mountains called the Bicej Mountains. And on top of them is a sphinx. And that sphinx is older than the Egyptian sphinx. And it looks like the weather has actually weathered it into the perfect shape of a sphinx head. It's incredible. So, in fact, for anyone who has ever watched Ridley Scott's Prometheus movie, and you see the part where they first come in to land on that planet, the head that you see there set into the mountain, he's literally copied it from the Bicej Sphinx.
Oh, interesting.
And in fact, the whole premise of that film, what you see set up inside of there, do you remember towards the end of the movie where they go in and they find, these ancient astronauts? There's this whole holographic projection and they see all these crossbreeding of species and stars and stuff in it. He literally took it from exactly what was going on under those mountains. Because what happened in 2003, the Romanian Secret Service, they discovered something under there. But what was happening was there were all these energy shields under there, and everyone that was going down there to try and get through the energy shields was dying. They couldn't get through it. So they actually brought in a guy who's codenamed Caesar. And Peter Moon talks about this in his books. And he is somebody who, as a baby, was spotted by the Romanian Secret Service as having these utterly extraordinary paranormal skills. And so they flew in a Tibetan Lama, basically, to come and train him. And so when they discovered this under the mountains, they called him in, and he managed to open up these energetic walls, shields down there.
Wow.
What they discovered under there was a series of caverns, halls, and a series of 5 tunnels. And the tunnels, 4 went across the world, so over to India, down to the Giza pyramids. There's all sorts of different places. So 5 different places. The 5th place being down into inner earth.
Wow.
And one of the halls that they found, when they went into it, it had an absolutely giant round table, and on the round table was script and language that was not discernible, and it was covered in white monatomic gold powder, built for giants. And the guy Caesar, when he got close to it, he managed to do what the others couldn't do, which was activate this table. And what happened was it activated all these holographic projections.
Wow.
And in these projections, it showed how over 93% of what humans have been told is history is in fact not the case. And mostly the true history is all in mythology, and that humans are superhuman. So it showed where humans' chromosomes and everything else have been tampered with. Crossbreeding of species, all sorts of stuff down there. It was showing humans as being extraordinary. And then effectively within, I think it was 2 hours, it was the head of the Bilderberg. I think it was the head of the Bilderberg flew in, and effectively
shut it down.
What started happening was it's quite a convoluted story, but yes, because there was part trying to help, part of Americans trying to step in and help, and other parts of the whole thing being shut down. And effectively the Romanian governments and all the media that were about to go out to the world and say what they discovered were threatened with them and their families to not say anything. So it got very much pushed underground and hidden. But of course, in recent times, there's so much has been coming out around it all. And as I say, if you go and read Peter Moon's books, you'll discover he talks about this at length. So he just talks all about. I mean, the Transylvania moonrise is quite interesting because it goes on and talks about tunnels through to Tibet and the blue people and all sorts of stuff. So. He's worked on the Montauk project, and it's very fascinating. He's worked very closely with Dr. David Anderson, who has the Time Travel Institute that he set up in Romania and in the States. It's fascinating stuff. And when you're out, well, the first time I went to Romania and I drove past the Bicege Mountains, I was trying to locate any way of trying to get into the mountain underneath, and you could see then where it was under guard.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, it's an incredible place. There's another part there. It's called Samosegatuja. It's another mountain, and it's the ancient sacred capital. So when you go up onto the top there, you've got a temple complex. It's ground level, but a temple complex. Ruin set out there, which is elemental temple complex. It's extraordinary, and that is where they say that their god Zalmoxes walked amongst them. So the ancient Dacians, it's the original peoples of out there, they worshipped a god called Zalmoxes, but Zalmoxes, very much like the Norse god Odin, one who would walk amongst them. It's this very similar thing. Not a god that sat outside in the sky somewhere, it's someone that was actually going to be literally with them, teaching them. So their practice of teaching was that they are immortal, and that literally for them to go die in battle, a bit like the Norse warriors, they wouldn't die. They knew that if they died, it was all about their place with Zalmoxes as they sort of kept reforming what they were doing. And a lot of their religion was around Zalmox's religion was about incanting, so how you speak things into being, basically. Really amazing stuff when you go and you actually look at it all. It's amazing. And what's really interesting is when I was in Samosagatuja, I found out that this is where I began to really discover a lot of stuff around that whole werewolf and vampire stuff. So let's be clear, in Romanian folklore, they have them. They have, strigoi and all sorts of mythological creatures that do certain things. But when it comes down to Vlad Dracul or Dracula and werewolves, I can share with you the origins of where this all comes from. So the werewolves, it was the Dacian warriors who were with the Zalmoxes god up on those mountains in Samosagatuja. And they had this whole thing where to them, the wolf was the most sacred of all creatures. And so for a warrior would have to choose and face a wolf in battle. And there would be this whole sacred exchange that would happen. And it would be agreed between the wolf and the warrior that whoever won would wear the skin of the other and would carry their soul. And so this is where the origin of the idea of werewolf, the man that is wolf, comes from. And so there's all sorts of mythological stories about the men that looked like wolves, because they would wear the wolf, and they'd wear the wolf's soul would be within them, and so they look like the wolf. And when we come to it is pretty amazing. And I think, like lots of stories, when you peel them back and you get to the origins, a lot of them are very sacred, actually. And then Dracula. So, there's a movie called Dracula Untold, and it starts to get a bit closer to the real story of Dracula and where Bram Stoker got his inspiration from to create this Dracula. But what most people don't know is what Dracula actually really means, because Vlad Dracul literally means son of the dragon. That's what it means. And the dragon line were to protect the innocent. That's why they were set up in the first place.
Right.
Just like in Samosagatuja, when we're looking at the werewolves, there was something called the Brotherhood of the Wolf. All of this is in a book I wrote, actually, called Zalmox's Pact. Thriller. But it's got all of this Transylvanian stuff in it. So if anyone's interested, I think they'd be quite interested in that.
That's cool,
So Vlad Dracul is where the idea of Dracula came from. And he was a Prince Vlad Dracul. And he was taken as a royal, or given over as a royal hostage to the Ottoman Empire at the time when the Ottomans were the most fearsome on planet Earth. And so they consistently threatened they wouldn't have been Romanians, they'd have been Wallachians at the time, but effectively what we know as Romanians now. They had to give over a couple of thousand young Romanian boys to the Ottomans every year, and they would put them in their genocide course. So for anyone who doesn't know what genocide is, it's the people that are 100% going to die. They send them out into battle, first of all. So they go in first and they'll die. That's guaranteed. So they would take these Romanian boys consistently and put them into their genocide cause. And when they took Prince Vlad Dracul as a royal hostage, he became known amongst them, because I think they treated him a little differently because he was royalty, but he became known as the most fearsome, terrifying warrior they'd ever seen, the Ottomans had ever seen. And he would impale
Vlad the Impaler.
Exactly, that's where the name came from, on the battlefield. So the Ottomans were terrified of him, but at the same time they felt like he was one of them. So eventually he came back to Romania. And when he came back, he'd already made a vow that he would never let that happen again. And so there's a very famous event that happened at his palace, Targovishta Palace, one Easter, where he basically invited the Ottomans to come. And before they came, he was sitting inside the palace, feasting with all of his buddies and war lords, and all of a sudden just invites all these warlords out to the front, and the next moment has impaled like masses of these warlords. And it's not just the guys, it's also the women. I don't even know if he did, I don't think it was the kids, but anyway, it was the warlords, basically all of those that had been handing over the young boys to protect themselves because they didn't want to give it. He impaled them all, and the Ottomans came because he'd invited them, and when they saw this they were terrified because they already knew him as Bad the Impaler, and so they sort of legged it back, and meantime started drawing all this propaganda of Vlad, calling him Vlad the Impaler, him walking through all these impaled bodies and dipping bread in blood and eating it. And that is where the origin of the story comes from. So he effectively became a monster to protect the innocent. And that's why I'm saying, for anyone who hasn't seen Dracula Untold, it's worth watching that movie, because you start to see something a bit closer to what the story is. And I can tell you now, I was sat in this fabulous, just outside this fabulous ancient monastery that's hidden in a side of a rock wall, talking to a Romanian priest one day, and he said to me, do you know, he said that all people in Romania in a heartbeat would be so happy if we could have Prince Vlad Dracula back, because they all recognise who he was. What he was actually doing. You know, I guess Robin Hood in a different guise, like, in a way, but you know, he became a monster to become the protector.
Well, they often spin a story, don't they, and change things.
Yes,
it seems to be quite a normal thing, really. I mean, you must have come across some interesting knowledge while you were out there. I mean, obviously that as well. I mean, these stories are incredible, but did you come across any kind of hidden magical knowledge that on your journeys as well? Because obviously I know, being on your course, you have like the most incredible knowledge, and it's like, has that just come to you, or have you come across it? Have you researched and found, how's it all work? Because you literally, I mean, anybody who gets the opportunity to go on Skarlet's course, just do it, because it's mind-blowing. But the knowledge you hold is crazy. So where does that come from?
Well, to be honest, what I would say is, when you truly show up to magic, it truly shows up to you. And a lot of people walk this earth thinking things are in their way, instead of realizing they're not in your way, they are your way. And if you'll lean into it, things will start to change. Just stop resisting and leaning in. And I guess that's what I've done from the get-go. And what I find happens is I get a massive intuitive pull to go somewhere. And for as soon as I get that pull, as soon as I act on it, it could be to meet somebody, it could be to go somewhere, whatever. As soon as I start to act on it, all sorts of stuff starts showing up. And so typically, if I'm going to places like that, things will start showing up just before I go. Weird things like, you know, suddenly Google pop-ups will pop up with something. I'm like, what the heck? How did that pop up with that? Or it'll be just, or I'll be walking somewhere and suddenly there's this, you know, strange thing like standing in a shop window trying to talk to me or whatever. So what happens is stuff starts to show up even before I get there. It starts directing me to certain things I need to go and look at or explore. And then when I get there, non-stop, I have crazy stuff. So I give you an example. In Israel, I went to Israel one time. I really wanted to follow the path of the Essenes. So basically they started off as, it was Akhenaten and Nefertiti and their mystery school. And, you know, supposedly they were killed in Israel, but they never were, because they scarpered out of Israel under these different guises, and basically made it down into, out of Egypt, I should say, and made it down into Israel. Yeah. And I wanted to follow their particular journey because I was fascinated, because I knew there was this whole this whole idea of the Immaculate Conception was actually all about sex magic. It was really about, I mean, I'm talking sexual alchemy, I'm talking about here.
Yeah,
the ability to conjure something out of life force energy. That's what I'm talking about. So I really wanted to follow this particular track. So I literally landed myself in Tel Aviv airport with nowhere to go at like 4 in the morning. One of my Israeli friends, she'd sent somebody to the airport, a taxi driver that she knew, which was kind of handy. And I said, oh, just take me down to the Dead Sea. He said, do you know where you're going to go? And I was like, no, just drop me. But I need to get there early because I've got to climb Masada today. So he's like, you're crazy. It's stupid heat. You can't climb it. And I said, no, I will. So he dropped me down super early, found myself a hotel, and then just started climbing Masada. And by the time I came down from Masada, a crazy amount of things happened on there where I met all sorts of strange people that told me that I must go to this particular waterfall that was near the caves where the Dead Sea Scrolls were written. Anyway, so I go to this particular, it's called Ein Geddon, I think it's called. Anyway, so I go to this waterfall, and it was quite a climb up, and it was, at that time it was already like 46 degrees or something. It was super hot. And as I'm coming down the hill, and I was thinking, right, so where do I go next? I've done the caves. I'm coming down from the waterfall now. I don't know what the next stop is. As I'm coming down, this guy standing on a path, and he looked like a rabbi, and he had this sort of white long beard and everything. And he said, oh, you look thirsty. And I said, I am. And he said, oh, come with me. And there was this like little office there. So we weren't at the bottom, and I said, oh, okay, cool. So I went into the office, and he got out some orange juice from the fridge. And he poured me some orange, and he poured himself some orange, and we sat and we talked. And he started saying things to me about me that were kind of mind-blowing, because I was like, how do you know that? How do you know that? And he said to me, you need to go up to Sfat. And Sfat is in the north of Israel. He said that is where the original Kabbalah was spoken into being. Because people think the Kabbalah was all written, but originally it was spoken. And well, you know, Anne, because you know what we're doing at the moment. The Book of the Spark, the most dangerous book on planet Earth. It's all connected. Anyway, so this is kind of where it started, my knowledge to unfold this. So this guy was telling me, you know, you need to go up to Sfat, you need to go amongst the cemeteries. You will know exactly which grave to step into. And I was thinking, what is he talking about? Anyway, he said, you must do this and blah, blah, blah. And this is the reasons why. And I said, oh, okay, fine. So I come out, say thank you for my orange juice, and I step out of his little office, and I walk about 10 steps down the path. I turn back and he wasn't there, and I thought, oh, obviously he's just gone. And then there was a warden, like some of the warden that was there, and I just said, oh, I need to find my way out. I'm heading to Sfat next. Do you know where that is? And he was like, oh, that's right up in the north of the country and blah, blah, blah. And I said, oh, well, I need to. He said, why are you going there? And I said, well, because your colleague just told me I need to go there. He said, what colleague? And I said, well, the guy that was in there that just poured me an orange juice. He said, what are you talking about? And he said, there's no colleague in there. And I said, yeah, he is. He said, Rabbi, I described him. He said, we haven't got anyone there that looks like that. We go in to this office, and there's no orange juice in the fridge. There's no glasses, and there's no man there.
What? Wow.
And he just materialised. And believe me, this is so normal. I have this so often. He just appeared, and he'd come and chatted, given me this instruction, and then disappeared again. I had an extraordinary guy who back in 2012 I met in Ireland when I was doing a book talk on a hill at the centre of Ireland called the Hill of Ishnok. And there was a guy that came up afterwards, and he just said to me, because I was doing a sort of a reading from chapter 1 of this trilogy that was actually set on that hill, and the owner of the hill said, can I come do it? And afterwards this guy came up to me, he said, what is that language you're speaking? And I said, oh, it's a language I speak between me and someone I call the Majors, thinking, oh, he's going to think I'm another fruitcase. Like, and he went, oh, you know the Majors? And I said, oh, okay, that's interesting. And then he said, I'd like to study you. He said, because I think either you're schizophrenic or you're actually speaking something that's extraordinary. It's not going through the brain mind, it's going through the true living mind. So I tested him in the way that I do test people, and he came out with flying colours. And it turns out that this guy was, he's a neuroscientist. He'd been a Hermetic monk since he was 4, and he spoke over 120 languages fluently, self-taught. And he used to get flown all around the world to go and decode things that people just couldn't decode. So for a year, he and I travelled together, and it was, apart from the fact that obviously he decoded all my language that I was speaking, as you know all about this, it was mind-blowing. So part of the reason I'm even saying this is because my journey, my Sacred Quest journey, so anyone that wants to read that trilogy, they're all available on Amazon. They're a minefield of, I don't know if that's the right word, of knowledge. There's so much knowledge in there, it's crazy. But he basically, he helped me decode all this stuff from my language, connected to the Book of Kells itself. We would never have been able to do that. And it's wild. My actual language was inside the Book of Kells. It's mental. So, but anyway, he basically, this guy had a full copy of the Book of Kells. And I said, how is that even possible? There's only 11 copies in the entire world. It's the oldest illuminated manuscript in the world. And this is where it began. It turns out he had, the A copy that he could actually do this. We would never have been able to decode this if he hadn't had a copy. It turns out he's the direct descendant of the bard magician, extraordinary bard magician, who had actually banished the very famous alchemists, the Tuatha Danann, underground in Ireland. So he was able to stand with me and do this whole procedure to raise them again, which is what we were doing together. It's a very quantum thing we were doing, I should add. But it was Matt. He said to me, and I'm coming back to your question about knowledge. At the time, he was saying to me, how are you being all this magic? This is amazing. I've been studying it since I've been tiny, and I never met anyone that's being it. I've wanted to be it. And I said, I don't know. This is what I'm doing. And then what was happening was he brought this incredible amount of knowledge to me. So it's like I'd had the experience and he was bringing all this knowledge, and together we were unfolding this crazy path together. And then he disappeared.
Wow.
He disappeared and I never saw him again. Literally, I'm not joking when I say disappeared. His number became unobtainable. He literally vanished. It was like he'd dropped in with the Tuatha Danann like, to guide me on this crazy journey to this certain point. It's mind-blowing. And if you read the trilogy, you'll see it all in there. And then he just disappeared. And it's like, I've had this so many times with the most extraordinary people that show up. I mean, yeah. And
how do you think that works, Skarlet? Do you think that's like timelines? Like you're jumping on different timelines on and off, or what?
I think
or is that a quantum thing in itself that people are just appearing?
Totally. Because if you think about realities and dimensions, they're all occurring at once.
Yeah.
Just our ability to see or not see them. How open are you and ready to do that? Yeah. And, if you think about things in quantum terms, everything that you can think of already exists. It's already present. And it exists as possibilities. And it's you choosing that, taking action on a possibility that collapses what's called a waveform into what we call reality and actuality. So what you've got going on, and this is why I love Christopher Nolan's movies so much, because he shows a lot of this a lot of the time. How, for example, at the end of Interstellar, where you see all times occurring at once. So what we think in human form is out of reach because it's in the future or in the past. That's simply not the case. It's only our human form that perceives it that way. It's actually all happening at once. So when you actually have, there's another movie, as you know, these are movies on our watch list, source code that shows brilliantly how essentially it's the whole sort of branching worlds theory, how essentially you, every time you kick off a choice, you kick off another you, and they all exist, and how it's all about where you place your consciousness. So as you know, what we focus on is drawing everything that we have been and will be into this one full form now. That's what we're all about. So yes, that's how, I think this is how realities glitch, and people come, think about, most people here will have watched The Matrix, I'm sure, that are watching this. So, The Matrix was brilliant back in its day for starting to give you a bit of an insight into it, not to show that things are dystopia, but to show you that, you are something in one reality inside the Matrix, but you are also that same person in another reality outside the Matrix, and they're happening in the same moment. They're not separate. So,
which kind of leads me back to where you were going about in Romania, where they closed it down effectively. So that, I think that's quite interesting, because that would say that they want to suppress the knowledge or the human ability of the fact that we are something very special otherwise. But why would they want to do that? Because is it because some people couldn't be trusted with that amount of power, or is it because they just want to keep it for themselves, and that's why it's so hidden and occult, if you like?
So I'm glad you used that word occult, actually, because just to say, people have a very big misunderstanding of what that means. And it's not a word to be feared at all. It's just something that's hidden. It's a bit like people have this major issue with the word apocalypse. They think that's everything's, fallen apart. It doesn't mean that. It's apocalyptic. It means massive revelation. So I'm really glad you used that word. But so coming back to why, I think you could spend forever trying to figure out why. The why doesn't really matter. What matters is, what do you do with that knowledge when you know that humans, that we're all actually superhuman, really? And it's been shut down, because surely if I heard that knowledge, that would be enough for me to say, I want a bit of that again, thanks very much. Yes, please. And I think right now, everybody is very aware that regardless of, what they're seeing on an individual level and the chaos that's going on planet Earth, because I don't think there's anyone on planet Earth that would disagree that it's in chaos right now. But, chaos is the most potent place of alchemy. When you're transforming something, you have to boil it. That's the chaos before it transforms into where it's going. And it's very clear. It's been clear to me for, since this all began for me, really. I've known this is all about the superhuman human that's coming in, the evolution of the human. You could say reclaiming, because, you could equally say, is that the superhuman under there from the past or the future? It doesn't really even matter, because all of that's happening in the same moment, from under the mountains. But the fact is, we are definitely in the age of the human becoming superhuman. That's undoubtedly the case when you look at everything that's going on, and we're in flux. And if you think everything that exists is 1% matter, 99% energy. So if, in terms of matter, if us in a physical human body, which we call matter, on a physical earth, which we call matter, in a physical universe, which we call matter, if that's only 1% of the 100% of the chaos that's going on, you can imagine the chaos that a lot of the quantum field is in at the moment as it's transforming. And my big thing, because this, you've heard me say it a lot, the thing that's transforming that has to end now is this idea of good versus evil. Because when that's playing out, it consistently loops people into this space of dissonance and losing their power, losing their uniqueness, losing connection. As soon as people stop focusing on this person's right, this person's wrong, and they focus instead on what could we create? you have an entirely different world, an entirely different field, and energy is radically different. And I think that's where we're going. I think that's what this, you just, if you look at what has come, people are inherently terrified of change, and yet it's wild because change is the most precious thing to the human being. Really, it's mad.
It's the only thing that we ever experience. We're always going to experience change, and you teach that, don't you? That's always going to happen. But interestingly, there was, what was it, the Spider-Man movie where it said, "If you with power comes responsibility." Now, with knowledge and power, surely comes responsibility. So you would need to come from a place of love, to make a positive change, wouldn't you? You know,
absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, love and magic are the same core thing. They both make the impossible possible. So 100%. If you fundamentally have deep respect and love and honor for everything around you, then there's no need to fight.
No.
Because what there is appreciation for a different perspective, as opposed to saying, I'm right, you're wrong. So I'm not saying for a moment that I condone people going and hurting others, because that's not a reality I choose on any level, not at all. But you know, if we're going to spiral as a race out of constant wars, we have to come out of this good versus evil, because it's that causes the wars, and it's blamed on all sorts of stuff. It can be blamed on religion and all sorts, but at the end of the day, that's just an excuse. Because the fundamental is, how prepared are you to actually truly show up to life itself and live it fully in a place where you truly value that life and you live it to the most amazing that you can. And I mean, you know, I don't know if anyone here has ever watched the series Merlin at all. BBC series. For anyone who hasn't watched it, it's a bit cheesy, but it's fabulous. And it has all the real, it's got a lot of the real ancient Welsh legends are in there, of all, not just Merlin, but a lot of the Welsh legends. The knowledge from the Welsh legends is incredible. If you're looking at the idea of life and death and alchemy, it's amazing. So there's a part in Merlin, and I don't want to spoil it for everybody, but there is a part in Merlin right towards the end where his father is saying to him, when Merlin thinks he's lost his magic, and his father says, you know, you're a son of the earth, of the sky, of the sea. This world is magic, and you were born of it. You can't lose what you are. Every time I say it, I have cold chills. Comes all the way back to that letter K again. There you go. And the elements. That's the case. The fact that we're standing on two legs and breathing air and living is magic in its own right. And people forget that. They take it all for granted. They don't think about it. They drop into their whatever, and they're not thinking about it. When we truly start working with magic, one of the first things we do is reconnect with that on a very deep level, so that we can start using the power that's in that, as you said, Anne, with responsibility and with honor, to truly start re-architecting reality. It's incredible. And that's really a lot of where the original Merlin, or Myrddin Emrys, Myrddin Taliesin, Myrddin Wilt, they're all different, some of the different faces of Merlin comes from.
I know that because we're going to do this in parts, so anyone watching this will realise that we're going to probably cut this short soon. We've already gone over what we plan to do, and I appreciate your time. But we want to do this in series of parts because you've got a lot to talk about, with a lot to learn, and it would be unfair to sit here for 8 hours. So, but I'd love to. Obviously, I want to end it on where people can find you, and think, you know, that's the usual thing. But I'd love it, if you don't mind, if you could just tell the viewers the King Arthur and the Merlin, and the way you explain the hero's journey, I think is such a valuable tool for people to appreciate, that where the power of their own magic is and their potential.
Yeah, so when we start with alchemy, there's one base thing that we have to understand before we even get going, and that's really what we're talking about when we mean quantum magic. When I was journeying with that guy that I mentioned, who was the linguist, etc., at one point he said to me, "Do you realise what you're doing?" He said, "What you're doing, let me play it back to you. What you're doing is ancient alchemy, and I'm going to show you how." So he was the one that showed me the beginnings of this. And he said, the story of Merlin and Arthur and the sword in the stone and the people in Albion is an out and out alchemical operation. In ancient hermetics, ancient alchemy, this is how reality is created. And he explained it to me, and he said, "You are doing it all the time, Skarlet. Do you not realise it?" And I was like, I haven't really thought about it. So just to put it really simply, and I'm not going to go into all the alchemical terms because it all gets a bit too techie if I do that. So I'm just going to keep it really simple. Merlin has magic, and he lives in a kingdom where people are terrified of magic. They think it's going to be used to hurt. So he's got a bit of a problem because he can't be himself. So what does he do? He wants to create a kingdom where he can truly be free to be him. So a kingdom where he can thrive in magic, people thrive in magic. In other words, he's willing himself to become a kingdom, really. So what does he do? He goes and he gets a sword, and using his magic, he thrusts it into a stone. Now, this is no random thing, because the sword and the stone, they represent the seen and the unseen, matter and antimatter, you could say. The stone is like the womb of or the void of all the unseen, of all possibility. And the sword, when it penetrates the stone, is the clarity, the ideas that start wrapping around a bit of energy and turn it into something like a cup or something, right? So he goes and gets a sword and a stone. He thrusts the sword into the stone. And at this point, he then calls along the people. And he tells them a story. And the story is critical, because without the story, things would have just carried on as they were. The story he tells them is this. 2,000 years ago, there was a king called Bruta. And he had this amazing kingdom. It was thriving. And that kingdom was called Albion. And yes, for anyone listening, of course, Albion is the ancient name for what used to be the United Kingdom, but it was the ancient Magic Isle, basically. So he had this kingdom called Albion, and just before he died, he thrust his sword into his stone, and he said only the true descendant of him would be able to pull that sword from that stone, and only then would Albion, that kingdom of magic, rise again. So then what does Merlin do? This is critical. He invites as many of them as possible to go and try and pull that sword from the stone. Because, of course, the more people that try and it won't budge, the more that legend becomes true in their minds. And at a point where he's satisfied that they are so convinced that this legend is now true, he goes and gets Arthur. He brings Arthur along. And Arthur says, "Don't be ridiculous. I can't pull that sword from that stone." And he says, "Just believe, believe." And he says, "You're the true descendant, believe." They do a really good job of it in the Merlin series, by the way. They do this quite accurately. So he says, "Believe, believe. You're the true descendant. You can do it." And so Arthur goes up. And of course, unbeknown to Arthur and the people, Merlin is using the same magic he used to make sure he could put the sword in the stone, to make sure he can pull it out again. As he pulls that sword out of the stone, instantaneously, Albion has returned. But it doesn't fall out of the sky. The reason it's returned is because that story has now become truth in the minds of the people. And instantaneously, in that truth, Albion has returned. Now, in ancient Hermetics, Merlin is called the prime mover, the god of the story. So he's the one in ancient Hermetics, ancient alchemy, that basically makes this reality change. And they say he is left unchanged, but everything else is changed. And that's a very flat view. what I say is, when we take this in terms of, that's a way that in ancient alchemy, they say that is how you change up reality. So you've got, you know, Arthur is the one that comes and pulls the sword. He's called the harmonization tool. Someone has to pull the sword from the stone so that that story comes to life, basically. But now, here's the thing, and we're going to look at it from a quantum perspective. If you go and look at it through the eyes of Arthur, he's growing up in a kingdom with no love. He wants to lead his people in love. So what's he going to do? So Merlin thinks he's created Arthur and he's created the people and the sword and the stone to get what he wants, Albion. But now Arthur says, okay, I need to change up this reality. So what does he do? He creates Merlin to go and put the sword in the stone, to find the people, to bring them along, and then to choose him, Arthur, so that he will come along and pull the sword from the stone, so that his kingdom of Albion, because to him, Albion is kingdom of love. His kingdom of Albion is now born. So we could be saying, wait, hang on a minute, Merlin was the one that created it. But at the same time, we can see that Arthur has created Merlin in the same moment. Two realities playing out in the very same moment, two parallel realities that have collided. Now let's switch and look through the eyes of the people. They live in a kingdom with no love and no magic. And that's not what they want. They don't want to lead it. They don't want to be responsible for it, but they want to live in it. They want to thrive in it. So they create Merlin and Arthur to show up so that they can live in their kingdom. Now it goes one step further. Albion, you could say, is this thought, this idea. But in the quantum terms, any thought and idea already is. But for it to thrive, it needs people to live in it, someone to lead it in love, and someone to make sure that the magic is always true and honourable. So Albion itself creates Merlin and Arthur and the people. So here we have every one person who believes they've created that reality has been created in the same moment by the reality they're creating.
I love it.
Merlin created Arthur, but was being created by Arthur. And they're all drawn together because they all have the same fundamental choice. And that choice is Albion's thriving existence, let's say.
Yeah.
Right? So that is, in very, very simple terms, the base point of where you get started with architecting reality through quantum magic.
I love it. Thank you for sharing that.
And as you know, at the moment, I'm literally about to release book 2, actually, of this 7-book series that's written for sort of age 11 upwards. It's amazing, actually, the feedback I'm getting from people from book 1 now, because it very much takes a lot of these. So the Sacred Quest trilogy, if anyone decides to go read that, you know, it's strong. Let's put it that way. And obviously, I sort of wrote it a long time ago now. Crikey, a long time ago now. And I think about that. I think I published it in 2012. And packed full of masses of like knowledge and information. It's a very raw story that when you start it, when you get to the end, you realize what you think you were seeing at the beginning and what the girl thinks she was seeing at the beginning is not at all what is. This one is geared for 11 years and up. And it's taking a lot of these principles and making them super simple for kids to understand and experience. And essentially, this one, of course, as you know, is the Lost Magic of Luminalia series. But so they all do different things, but they all bring equal amounts of knowledge, but in different ways. But yeah.
But if we can get that book out to as many 11-year-olds as possible and they start creating their magic through love, what a difference this world will be.
Yeah, it's very, you know, I'm very clear at saying, you know, magic is not in a wand or in a spell, it's in you.
Yeah.
It's the magic that's always been in you. You just have
where
to...
do people... Go on, sorry. Go on, no, say you say your bit. I was interrupting then, sorry.
No, I was just going to say, you just have to be ready to remember.
I've been saying that a while on this channel, so we need to remember who we are. That's the thing, and we're very special, and I'm convinced people are waking up to it slowly as well. I am convinced of that. So where do people buy these books, Scarlett? Where's the best place to get them?
Oh, Amazon. They're all on Amazon.
Okay, so we'll put some links in the show notes. It's Christmas is coming as well. They'll make great presents for the younger generation.
This is a sort of, it doesn't actually have that across there, but that's that's book one of the 11 plus series that I've got adults reading it that are blown away. I mean, I'll be honest, consistently, people are telling me it gives them the feeling when they first read Harry Potter, Narnia, Skandar, those feelings. It's very, very magical. And it's very much geared up for people of all ages, really. Whereas I would say the Sacred Quest trilogy, that's 100% 18 plus, definitely. And Zal Moxie's Pact. Zal Moxie's Pact has a lot of Transylvanian information in it. It's a hardcore thriller between Hollywood States and Transylvania, and it's a paranormal thriller, basically. That's what it is. It's full of all this magic as well. Yeah,
fabulous. And your website is Liminal9 with a number 9.
Liminal9 Academy.
Yes.
It's liminal9.com. Yeah, exactly.
And I'll put all that in the show notes, so you can, if anybody's interested. Skarlett runs the best courses I've ever been on. The detail just out of this world. So I highly recommend anybody who's interested to learn alchemy and learn how to. I found that it's helped my mental health massively. I've already spoken to you about that, because I feel that I've become more in charge of my reality. Whereas I felt that it was running away from me sometimes in the past. I've become more of an observer of the avatar of Ant Critchley, if you like, and it's quite interesting, really. So you've taught me a lot over the past, I think, 18 months, I think, something like that. I think I've been working with you on your course, but it's out of this world. So highly recommend it. And we'll do a part 3 hopefully in January. I always enjoy chatting to you. I've got so many questions I have. I've kept myself back. I've held myself.
I'd love to come back and do part 3.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Skarlett. And
thank you.
You take good care.
Yeah, you too. Thank you.